And so when I moved here almost about 10 years ago, I often ask myself, kind of like, where are all the Black people, right? And so, but at this time, I also worked in Oakland. So always was out there being part of cultural events. But as I start working a little bit closer to Napa, I noticed that there wasn't any Black History Month events and activities to attend. And I thought maybe folks felt a little weird about Black History Month, an event, a celebrating event, knowing that white people will be present, mostly white people, as we know, Napa, the climate and community of our environment. And so I totally understand and understood that that would be very uncomfortable to see white people celebrating Black history. So I wanted to at least offer a space for folks to appreciate and educate Black history while including some of the local Black businesses. So here we are 5 years later, and it's getting better each and every year. Um, and considering the climate we're in today, and so with COVID, and so just wanted to thanks everyone for joining this event. And I also want to add that Crosswalk Church is the home for the event, but for obvious reasons, we're online again this year. So I would like to thank everyone again for joining us today and welcome everyone. And I'm super excited about today's program. And so, as we will hear from our youth and others in our community, we'll also have the honor to learn from Dr. Laurie Watson in the later segment at the intersection. And we'll end up with the meal pickup at Crosswalk Church from 4:30 to 6 o'clock. And I'm happy to announce we did sell out of all of our meals. So I just want to thank all of you who purchased a meal, and it's going to be delicious. But first, we're going to begin the program with the focus on our future leaders, our future movers and shakers. We're here from Tula Sholey with the reading segment. And we're also going to hear from students from American Canyon Middle School. So with that being said, I would like you all who have young ones present to show their beautiful, wonderful faces on the screen and enjoy this wonderful segment from Tula Sholey. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Tula Shuley. I am 8. My pronouns are she and her, and today I'm going to be reading We March by Shane W. Evans. People come in many shapes, colors, and sizes. We are all amazing. Throughout history, people have been treated unfairly because of the color of their skin, who they love, or because they moved here from a different country. In the 1960s, a lot of progress was made thanks to civil rights workers and leaders like Martin Luther King Jr. Today, people are still fighting to make things fairer for Black, brown, and LGBTQ people. The morning is quiet. The sun rises. And we prepare to march. What is an activist? Someone who speaks up for change and wants to make the world a better place. We pray for strength. We work together. We come from all over to march. We follow our leaders. And this illustration shows many leaders during the civil rights movement, including A. Philip Randolph, Whitney M. Young Jr., James Farmer, Roy Wilkins, John Lewis, Bayard Rustin, and Martin Luther King Jr. We walk together. Look at the different people in this illustration. Notice the different ages, races, cultures, and abilities. Anyone can be an activist. We sing. We are hot and tired, but we are filled with hope. Being an activist can be hard work. These activists are working hard to make the world a better place. We lean on each other as we march to justice. What is social justice? Social justice is in many ways a combination of fairness and opportunity. In a just society group, or people have the same rights and are not pushed more because of who they are, what color their skin is, or who they love. To freedom. What is freedom? Freedom is the state of being free. You can be free to learn, to express yourself, follow anything you want to be or do, and love who you want to. Many people work hard and speak up for these freedoms. Martin Luther King spoke up for people who were being treated unfairly because of the color of their skin. To our dreams. Free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last. Thank you.
Sula, thank you. Thank you. That was great. What a wonderful story, and what a wonderful message. Thank you. And so next we'll have a video from American Canyon Middle School.
Hi, my name is Bobby Ruth. I'm an assistant principal here at American Canyon Middle School in Napa Unified School District. Every year, we celebrate Black History Month here at American Canyon Middle School. This year, we had the privilege of working together with Mr. James Thompson with his Black History Month celebration event. The following video highlights the thoughts and ideas that our students at ACMS have of Martin Luther King Jr. Enjoy.
Martin Luther King, to me, is a hero. He did numerous things to help the nation and helping there be equality rights in schools and everything. He means a lot to me.
Martin Luther King Jr. means a lot to me because he fought for equal rights and to end segregation. One example is how he went to Memphis, Tennessee, and fought for equal pay for Black sanitization workers.
What does Martin Luther King mean to me? Well, it means a lot. He helps me to realize that we don't always have equality and that we have to be one.
It also helped other civil rights activists who were struggling, and then also brought them together, which was easier for all of them.
And work together to, it wasn't just one person or one group. It was everybody who came together.
The way that Martin Luther King impacted our lives was his speech for justice and equality. All people should be equal.
To me, Martin Luther King is a life changer.
And he's inspired.
Martin Luther King Jr. was a very inspirational person during his time. He did a lot of inspirational things that significantly impacted the African American community and inspired them to strive for equality. Some of the things he did was the March on Washington, which where famous I Have a Dream speech, and his March on Selma, which was similar to the bus boycott that he did to help segregated buses, and so that they're more welcome to the Black community and that they don't have to sit at the back of the bus. He was also a really brilliant person. He was a great father and also a pastor. And in conclusion, he impacted the Black community and everyone to help fight for equality and make sure that everyone has a chance to be the best person that they can be.
So what a great video by Bobby Ruth and his students over at American Canyon Middle School. So next we're going to have Kim. She's a community member from
one hand holding tight my other hand. Come celebrate with me that every day something has tried to kill me and has failed.
So so what we're going to do next, before we take a break, I just want to read you a quote by John Henry Clark. And so we'll also post that quote, right? So you guys can see it as well, right? 1 second. And so this is from John Henry Clark. He was a historian and someone that I learned from. And so he says, history is a clock that people use to tell their political and cultural time of day. It also is a compass that people use to find themselves on a map of human geography. History tells a people where they've been, what they've been, and where they are, and what they are. Most importantly, history tells a people where they still live, where they still must go, and what they still must be. History, the relationship of history to the people is the same as the relationship of a mother to her child. So what we'll do next is we'll take probably a 7 minute break, and then we'll come back, and then we will continue the rest of the program. For those who joined us who may not come back with children, thank you for joining, and hopefully we can see you all at Crosswalk at 4:30. So we'll be back. We'll be back at 1:57 to continue the event.
carry on. Just a mention of your name seems to drive my head insane. Girl, do I do what you do when I do my love to you, baby? Yes, I got some candy kisses for your lips. Yes, I got some honeysuckle chocolate dripping kisses full of love for you. Yes, I got some candy kisses for your lips. Yes, I got some honeysuckle chocolate dripping kisses full of love for you. My life has been waiting for your love. My arms have been waiting for your love to arrive. My heart has been waiting, my soul anticipating your love, love, From the time that I awake, I'm imagining the good love that we'll make. If to me, if I can do all this, well, just imagine how it's gonna feel when we hug and kiss. Sugar, do I do what you do when I do my love to you? Alright. Yes, I got some candy kisses for your lips. Yes, I got some honeysuckle chocolate dripping kisses full of love for you. Yes, I got some candy kisses for your lips. Yes, I got some honeysuckle chocolate dripping kisses full of love for you. My life has been waiting for your love. My arms have been waiting for your love to arrive. My heart has been waiting, my soul anticipating your love, your love, your love, 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 love. Oh, I don't care how long it might take, 'cause I know the woman for me you I'll make. And I will not deny myself the chance of being part of what feels like the right romance. Girl, do I do what you do when I do my love to you? Oh yeah. Yes, I got some candy kisses for your lips. Yes, I got some honeysuckle chocolate dripping kisses full of love for you. Oh, yes, I got some candy kisses for your lips. Yes, I got some honeysuckle chocolate dripping kisses full of love for you. Girl, I got some candy kisses for your loving, baby. Oh yeah. Do you want some candy? Do you want some honeysuckle? Do you want some chocolate dripping kisses for love for you? Woo!
All right, welcome back, everyone. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna try to get a little interaction going on with the trivia that Kim is going to lead. So Kim, take it from here.
Yeah, so let's see. We have a few questions to test your knowledge of Black history. So let's see how you do. The first one is, who founded Black History Month? Does anyone know who founded Black History Month?
Please type your answers in chat.
I know you all are looking it up.
Yeah, I was going to say Googling is allowed.
Yes, it is. We'll give you all just a few. If we were playing Kahoot, you probably would have about 30 seconds left. Do people agree with what's... Oh, okay. Okay. Good job. Good job, Carter G. Woodson. I'm going to sneak another question in here that's not part of the script, but I'm wondering how long was the original, when Carter G. Woodson came up with the idea, how long was it? Was it a month? Yes, all right. People know, yep, good job. It was originally 1 week. It was originally 1 week, and it was to recognize and acknowledge the contributions of African Americans and people of African descent to history, to world history. So, and specifically to the history of the United States. So good job, good job. Okay, next question. When was the NAACP, which of course stands for the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, founded? Was it in 1809? 1909 or 2009? And thank you, Jenny. She's put the... Oh, the people are quick on that one. People are quick on that one. Good. People are quick on this one. Yes, early 20th century. Good job. Early 20th century. That is the answer. I was trying to trick you on that one, but you all didn't fall for it. I thought some people might put 2009, but no. Or 1809, if you all think about early history. But no, 1909 is the correct answer. So now we're going to jump ahead a little bit in history. And let's think about who was the first African American to win a Nobel Peace Prize. This is a tricky one because I always get it wrong. I always actually get this wrong. Do people know? People are going to be tempted to put, oh, Pete is quick. Reverend Pete is very quick on it. Yes, Hannah. Okay. It's okay. I know. Pete, Reverend Pete didn't Google. I could tell Reverend Pete didn't Google. Yes. All right. Yeah. People, everyone probably is tempted to put Martin Luther King Jr., right? But no, it was Ralph C. Bunche. It was much earlier than Martin Luther King Jr. So that's something to think about with history. And if you don't know who Ralph Bunche is, you should definitely Google, or you should look up and research Ralph Bunche and what his contributions were. I'll give you a hint that they are diplomatic. He was a diplomat. All right, a couple more. This is one of my favorites. Who was the first African American to win a Nobel Prize in literature? Now I'm showing my English teacher bias. I had to throw that one in there. That first African American to win a Nobel Prize in literature. I think people might know this one. Oh, Jenny is, of course. Yes. I see the teachers chiming in. The teachers chiming in. Yes, the teacher. I love it. I love the teachers chiming in. Absolutely. Toni Morrison, who famously wrote Beloved and The Bluest Eye and Song of Solomon and Jazz, and we can go on and on. Her short story is being republished, actually. Redicaf is being republished. So that's just a little tidbit there. Okay, the Olympics are happening, the Winter Olympics. This is not a Winter Olympics question, but it is an Olympics question. What female athlete was considered the fastest woman of all time. I think her record was just broken, but the 100-meter record. The fastest woman of all time, and set the record for the 100 and 200 meter. Oh, people are quick. Audra, I like that. People were quick on that. Yeah, you remember that, Anthony. Excellent. Yeah, what was the nickname? Do people remember her nickname? Yeah, Karen. Yeah. Excellent. Flo Jo. And I believe she still has the record for the 200 meter, which was something like 20.59 seconds, something like that. And I believe that record still stands, but I don't. The 100 meter was 10.49, and I think it just was eked out this past summer, if you believe that. That was in 1988. Think about how long that record stood. Okay, so this is the last one, and the theme for the Black History Month this year is health and wellness. JT, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not getting the title right. The title, is it health and
Yes.
health and wellness? So this last question is about that. Do you all know that there was an African American doctor who was the first to pioneer the blood preservation methods that led to successful blood donation? Do you know who that person was? And Jenny has graciously typed the question in the chat. I actually asked true or false. I did ask if it's true, but I also wonder, we should definitely true. Definitely true. Who? Anne, I don't think Anne Googled that. I think that came off the top. People remember, yes, Charles Richard Drew. Yes, Dr. Charles Richard Drew is the answer. The person to pioneer blood preservation techniques that have led to now successful blood donation was African American Dr. Charles Richard Drew. So just a little test. You all did well. Googling or non-Googling, you all did really well. I'm proud of you. Good job. Thank you. Thanks for playing.
Thank you, Kim. And how about we spend the next minute or two, folks, if you all have any Black history facts or trivia facts, just go on and just flood the chat with them, and we'll just look at the chat, because I'm pretty sure there's a lot more trivia and facts out there that you all probably know. So just go on and jot them down in the chat for the next minute or so. Yeah, so Juan, I didn't know that. That's a great one there. Does anyone have the answer for Lacey's question? 1804. Okay. Thanks, Juan. Nadine Burke-Harris. And Nadine is doing a wonderful job too, as far as introducing trauma and trauma-informed care as well. Okay, all right. All right, so I'm just going to redirect us back to this quote um, by by John Henry Clark, and I just want to just read it one more time. And he says, "History is a clock that people use to tell the political and culture time of the day. It is also a compass that people use to find themselves on the map of human geography. History tells a people where they've been, what they are, and and yeah, where they are and what they are. Most importantly, history tells the people where they must still go and what they still must be. The relationship of history to the people is the same relationship of a mother to their child." And so when I read this quote, I think of a child without their caregiver and the difficult time they might have when they're trying to find their identities in this world. And the same with history. If we don't know our history, it's extremely difficult to understand others and sometimes ourselves, right? And so when we don't have those types of guidance or healthy influences, we kind of tend to survive the best way we know how. And so as I think of my younger self, a little kid raised in East Oakland, California, I was born into trauma and lost many of my friends and loved ones to violence at a young age. And so my trauma story was set before, I even entered the world. And you accompany that with other types of racism, and it just builds this huge trauma, traumatic situation. And so and so when we think about trauma, we all often think of it from an individual lens, but trauma can also impact an entire people, right? And so an entire generation, an entire race, such as genocides, or in the case of my fellow African Americans, slavery, right? And so when reoccurring complex trauma occurs on this large scale over hundreds of years, the effect is profound, right? We have these lingering subconscious feelings of anger and helplessness and stress, and it's like this overwhelming impact on the mental health of our Black Americans, right? And so this is historical trauma related to American slavery, and it's also and it's also an assault on our health and wellness. Okay, so next slide. And so when traumatic events like slavery happens, then we have this, residual effect that exists way after the actual event, right? And so research indicates and it tells us that, race, like race and place, often seems to determine health outcomes. And I mentioned that I'm from Oakland, California, and those who are familiar with Oakland, California, there's a street that's called MacArthur Boulevard. And MacArthur Boulevard it's a street. It's probably one of the longest streets that go throughout Oakland. But there was some research that says that folks who are born above MacArthur Boulevard have a 12 years more life expectancy than residents born below MacArthur Boulevard. And so when you think of that, um, and I was one of the folks who were raised below MacArthur Boulevard. And so when you think of that and you think of um, even have an idea of what majority of the identities and folks that live in the Oakland Hills, which is above MacArthur Boulevard, compared to the folks who live below, right? And I'm pretty sure we can make some of those same comparisons here in Napa, right? And so next slide. And so what has happened to our Black communities, right? So there's a disproportionate amount of insidious trauma that has happened, historical trauma and institutional racism, right? And so when you have these things that happens in these particular places, and then you attach a race to it, then you will see a higher prevalence of community violence, right? Especially in these under resourced and misserved neighborhoods, largely populated by Black folks and people of color. And so these results of insidious trauma and historical trauma and institutionalized racism causes some very concerning health concerns for our community. And so so it's very important to look at from this whole trauma-informed lens, instead of saying like, what's wrong with these Black communities? No, it's like, what has happened? So we have to sort of switch that lens, like what has happened to this community, and a lot of us can really relate that to our history, and especially with slavery and what it has done to our community. Next slide. And so I'm not only here to talk about harm, I'm also here to talk about hope. And there's ways that that I discovered to counteract the stress I needed to build my resilience skills to recover from the racial trauma I experienced. So let me read the guiding principle. This is a trauma-informed system guiding principle, which is resilience and recovery. And it said trauma can have a long-lasting and broad impact on our lives that may create a feeling of hopelessness. Yet, when we are focused on our strengths and clear steps we can take towards wellness, we are more likely to be resilient and recover. And so, although I feel like, my community, especially the African American community, has experienced a lot of trauma, but we are very resilient people, and I just want to put that out there. And although this is the theme is health and wellness, I just want to say that next slide, by the way, Jenny, I'm sorry, is that when we focus on like these big interventions, and so when folks think of health and wellness and trauma and how it's related, some folks are just thinking like, oh, we just need to send everybody to therapy. We need to send them here. And I'm in the mental health field. And I know that some big interventions are great. We have, in the mental health field, we have all these things in therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy. We have trauma-focused therapy, DBT, and all these things that you have to have a license to actually do these things, right? And so these are all these big I interventions to heal trauma, and that's okay. That's okay. And there's other interventions that requires policy and large efforts, right? And so, but I'm here to just kind of talk about a little bit on this slide about the little I's, the little interactions, and how equally important they are, right? And so these are the things I have control over, and we all have control over, and they help me during during my healing of racial trauma. Okay, and so I'll talk just a little bit. There's a couple of them, and so we think about the first one. I think it's let's see, paying attention, right? And so Jenny, if you can click that one, and I can read first one. And so paying attention, and it's basically talks about, it says study shows that that mindful people have stronger immune systems and are less likely to be hostile or anxious. And so, so meditation is something that's super important for to build those resiliency skills, right? And so, giving thanks is one, and it says research reveals enormous power of simply counting our blessings. Regular expressions of gratitude promote optimism, better health, and greater satisfaction with life. And so, giving thanks, and that's something that I try to do all the time. And so, get moving. So regular exercise. We know that regular exercise is it's that immediate. It says that it's that the most effective instant happiness booster is exercise of all. And so these are things that we have control over and that we can do. Okay. And so this one on the far right, the practice kindness. This is huge, and it says being kind to others makes us feel good. Altruistic acts light up the same pleasure centers in the food in the brain as food and sex. So yeah, so be kind, and be kind for that one. So yeah, so these are the little I's that we're talking about that all of us can do to take care of ourselves when we're talking about health and wellness. And so, and I, and I just want to say to everyone to just challenge those little I's, because sometimes we have no control over the big I's, but we can do. I think everyone on this call can actually do these little 6 habits of happiness. Okay, and so yeah, so that's all I have for this piece, and I know that Dr. Laurie is going to be joining us in about 9 minutes. But what I want to do is I want to maybe if folks have any questions or comments or anything, I want to open the floor to folks who might be have any questions or clarity or anything about what they've learned or heard so far.
I had 2 questions. My first question is, sometimes you use the word African American, sometimes you use Black. Are they interchangeable? And my second question is there a list of Black businesses to support in the Napa Valley?
Yes. Yeah. So let's do the second question first. So James Moss, he is Black wine owner, maker in Napa. And I think everyone knows about Brown. And so those, to my knowledge, those are the only 2 African-American wine owners. And then of course we have Buster's Barbecue out in Calistoga. And then Durrell, I forget the name of his barbecue sauce, but Durrell, he's in Napa and he has his own barbecue sauce. Yeah, so what I'll try to do is I'll get a list of it. I think I have one and I can share it in the chat area. Okay. Yeah, but I can assure you I can probably count them on one finger though. And so, but hopefully that changes. And then I think for your first question, yeah, it's one of those complex questions, because I think when I use African Americans, I kind of speak for folks who are kind of foundational Black Americans. And so because when I use the word Black, there's different ways to be Black. So you have folks who Black foreigners who may come from Africa and they're Black as well, right? But they're not African Americans. So it's a little different. So there's different ways to be Black, and it's complex too. And folks are coming up with different terminology all the time. And so I hope that answers your question. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Mhm. Any other questions or comments?
Hi, JT. Nice to meet you in this context. I have a question about, since moving to Napa, I've always lived in communities that had a large Black population. That's how I grew up, and moving to Napa was a bit alarming in how binary it is with the Mexican American community and the mostly Mexican community, immigrant and white. But I recently, and I attributed that to just immigration patterns, but I recently learned that we were a sundown town, and that there were actually laws on the books up until some point in time, but I haven't found that history. I'm wondering if anyone here knows when we officially had a law on the books that prohibited anyone with dark skin from being out after dark in Napa.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I know, I don't know if that information, there's a book by Alexandria Brown, and it's called The Hidden History of Napa Valley. And I don't know if that's something that was in there, but yeah, that's a good question. And thank you for bringing that up, because I will research that.
There's always a reason why. There's a deeper reason why.
Yeah, definitely.
And I wish I'd asked the question sooner.
Yeah.
Because it is odd. I mean, you go, as soon as you go to Vallejo, American Canyon, we suddenly have American Canyon High is very diverse compared to Napa High.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And thank you for bringing that up too, as far as American Canyon, because that's one of our goals, is trying to get them more involved in events like this, for that fact, because they are the city that has the most African American population in this county, and so we need to do a better job at getting their voices heard and getting them involved and included in events like this. And thank you. And I see right here, I think Jenny shared the link for Alex's book. It's a great book. If you want to learn a little bit about the history of Napa, definitely go get that and read it. Okay, we got about a few more minutes. If anyone else have any questions or comments, please share.
Hi, this is Nancy Nord-Kanegi again, and I'm a retired teacher with the Napa Valley Unified School District, and I co-lead at Equity and Inclusivity Council. This is the second year, and I've been trying to get a Black speaker, either a student or a parent of a student, to give a perspective. What is Napa Valley Unified School District? Or actually, we are now partnering with Napa Valley College and Pacific Union College. So we're a K-14 equity group. And I would love a speaker with a Black perspective on what NVUSU is doing well, teaching Black students, and in what areas could they improve. So if you have any ideas, I would appreciate it.
Yeah, I think, I think with that piece, I think there is a Black Student Union at American Canyon High School, and the reason why I say that, because there's multiple people probably in that group, and so there's different perspective of the different African Americans or Black people in that group, and so that way it's multiple perspective and not just one. And so so maybe start there, and also know that you all will meet Dr. Laurie in a minute, and so and there's also an option to speak with Dr. Laurie at some point too as well. So but thank you. All right, one last one. Anybody? One last one. We got about a minute left. Last question or comment or anything? All right. Okay. Well, thank you for your questions and comments. Thank you so much for that. And so, so without wasting any more time, I do want to introduce you to Dr. Laurie Watson. And I think, I'm just so grateful that I've had the opportunity to learn from Dr. Laurie's teaching for the last, I believe, 6 months. And I continue to learn from Dr. Laurie. And I think the things that I've been learning has helped me grow in not only my professional life, but my personal life as well. And so I'd like to introduce you to this next segment. You all are going to have a blast with this, and I'm pretty sure you're going to learn probably just as much as I did. And so, without further ado, Dr. Laurie Watson. Hello, Dr. Laurie.
JT, Laurie had to pop off for a minute.
Okay.
So.
Okay.
Camera was not working, so she's going to try to get back on, and hopefully it will be working then.
Okay. All good.
Short break for everyone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I guess maybe should we take like a 5-minute break? How'd that sound?
Well, JT, I had a quick question. Maybe if you want to take a quick break, but
okay.
The trauma stuff really inspires me, and wondering if anybody leads trauma workshops in the area. I think we could all benefit from that, but particularly people who have been traumatized over time. I think I've worked with people who have had like trauma around violence or crisis, but this idea of trauma over decades, years of particular formative years is really concerning. So I'm wondering if there's workshops or anything for that.
There's a lot of trauma-informed efforts going out there. There's a trauma-informed care, right? There's trauma-informed care, and then there's trauma-informed systems of care. And so trauma-informed care is like, how do we recognize trauma, interpersonal trauma that may happen? And then there's trauma-informed systems. It's like, what are our systems doing to induce trauma?
Yeah.
Because we do have a lot of systems that's intended to heal, but they end up inadvertently doing harm, right? And so I think we have to look at it from that. Like, sometimes we know how to respond to individuals, but what are we doing for our systems that's inadvertently inducing trauma? There's a lot of I don't think there's anywhere within our county that have trauma workshops, but there's a lot of organizations out in the greater Bay Area that have a lot of trauma workshops, and so I can get back with you on providing some of the organizations that do a lot of trauma trainings and trauma.
Okay. Thanks, JT.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Thank you. There we go. How you doing, Dr. Laurie?
Sorry about that. Hey, how are you today?
I am good.
My camera has just been giving me headaches over here, so I apologize for that.
Oh, no, yeah, all good. I'm liking the shirt. I'm liking the shirt.
Thank you.
All right. Okay. So I guess we're all set for Dr. Laurie Watson. And then I'll after Dr. Laurie's done with the segment, I'll circle back and give you all details about next steps. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Laurie.
Thank you. Well, I just want to say thank you all for having me today. I'm really excited about being a part of this amazing program. And, you know, I'm not going to jump into it. I'm going to hand this off to my partners in crime over here, Ann and Lilia. I'm going to let them start us going. But again, just thank you all for having me here today.
Laurie, are you a co-host now? Can you share the slides?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Real quick introduction then. I'm Ann Sakawi Hemstreet. My pronouns are she or they. I was a co-founding member of Rainbow Action Network, and now I live in North Carolina. But I am co-leading the Rainbow Family League with Dr. Laurie and Lilia, and just thank the world of JT and Jenny and Kim and all of our organizers today. So I'm happy to be here from North Carolina as the sun sets.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lilia Hine. I am the Community Programs and Network Manager at First 5 Napa County. And I'm so excited to be here and partner in this work with some amazing community leaders. We were so excited to bring Dr. Laurie Watson into this event. She has been our grown-up facilitator for Rainbow Family League, as Ann mentioned, and it is just such a great opportunity to learn from her and then be able to share her knowledge with the greater community. So thank you.
And thanks again, everybody. For those who don't know me, my name is Laurie Watson, and I am the founder and CEO of my racial equity agency, I'm going to call it today, Race Work. And my work is largely dedicated to taking people along their own personal racial equity journey, to deepening their understanding about race, racism, and power, and really hoping to have people elevate their own personal racial consciousness. Again, this work is all about how do we come together collectively, you know, for the greater good, and really just level out the playing field that right now we know is not level and everyone does not have an equitable opportunity in order to achieve success because of how systemic and institutional racism play out. And so I've just been having such a great time with the First 5 around this work, really kind of meeting it at this intersection, which is why I think it's so important as we engage in this conversation today, that we really think about Black history through this intersectional lens. You know, often when we discuss Black history or American history, that intersectional experience that people are having is excluded from the conversation. And as we know, at least as we should know, you know, we should be looking at them as they interrelate, because Black history is American history, although it's treated as something separate and distinct. You know, we recognize that while as we only have 1 month where it's highlighted, when in fact we should be looking at the contributions of Black Americans 12 months throughout the year, because it's central and true to the study of our country. And so again, it's not just a lesson that we need to embark upon only in the month of February. The history of Black people and their contributions to this nation cannot be confined to just 28 days of the year. And so we need to take the time that's necessary to unlearn the lies perpetuated across generations, and to think deeply about who and what made this country what it is and what it still can be. And so what I want to do is just really give honor to the man who got us to where we are now when it comes to even recognizing Black history, and that was Carter G. Woodson. And he fervently believed that Black people should be celebrated, you know, that we should be proud of our heritage, and that all Americans should understand and know the achievements that Black Americans made to this nation. He saw African American contributions as often overlooked or ignored, and even suppressed by the writers of history books and the teachers who use them. And so for Black scholars to study and preserve history, Woodson realized he would have to make a separate institutional structure. And he founded the Association of Negro Life and History in 1915, describing its mission as the scientific study of the neglected aspects of Negro life and history. His devotion to showcasing the contributions of Black Americans finally bore fruit in 1926 when he launched Negro History Week. And then ultimately, it became Black History Month when it was declared in 1976. And so quite a long journey to getting to where we are. And as the work continues, as I do so much work with educators in schools, trying to push the narrative that, again, we shouldn't just confine this to the month of February, but how do students get an opportunity to learn about the contributions, not just of Black Americans, but Americans from all different races and ethnicities and cultures, and the contributions that were made in order, again, to get us where we are and ultimately where we need to be. And so I thought it would only be right to start this segment of the program off with a singing of the Negro National Anthem, which is Lift Every Voice and Sing. And I found this amazing clip of students singing it. And so I just really wanted to begin our program with this.
Sing a song, this is my country. Sing a song of my birth. Sing a song every mountain side. Sing a song with your voices. Let freedom ring. Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring. Ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of a new day.
how they brought it all together. This promise of this nation for everyone. So how do we bring that to fruition? And it takes all of us, again, engaging in this work, engaging in conversations collectively, again, across all races, ethnicities, culture, identity, working together for this common mission, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And so where we're going to go today is, again, kind of engage in a conversation about thinking about this through this intersectional lens, while at the same time diving into some dialogue between each other. And I want to introduce you to some tools that I use as I engage people in this work that really create a safe space for us to have this conversation. A conversation about race, even though this is Black history, you know, yes, but we're getting into some racial dialogue here. And so for some people, that's a challenge. And so how do you create a space, establish some parameters around how we engage in that conversation? And so what I want to introduce you to, first of all, is this idea of that I forgot it was time for Ann to share right now. That is what I want to do. So Ann, you should have just said, Laurie, shut up right now. It's time for me to talk. But we're going to go back to where I was taking you in a minute. Go ahead, Ann, lay it down. Lay down some knowledge for the group.
All right, it's my turn to talk to you about why it's so important that we're all having this conversation and why we all need to know about Black history. It's important that people learn that the civil rights movement and the fight for Black freedom and justice included white allies working alongside Black people. If Black history learning includes examples of this, then everyone can see themselves as part of this larger mission toward justice and equity for Black people. It's also important that Black history is learned all year and not just in February. I know Laurie already mentioned that, and that it is woven into the discussion of American history. Black people are part of our entire United States history, and not just part of the slavery and the civil rights movement narratives. Black people have made significant contributions in all fields that exist, including science, math, medicine, business, law, education, art, music, fashion, faith, sports, fitness, etc. And yet we often only hear about the contributions of white people. And let's be honest, most often white, heterosexual, cisgender men. Not to mention that slavery is white history too. So it is Black history is American history. Thirdly, I just want to say that it's important that when we learn about important contributions by historical and current figures, that we learn all of their identities, not keep certain parts of their identities hidden. All people need to know what Black LGBTQ people contributed, because representation matters. The life expectancy of Black trans women is 35 years old, compared to 76 years old for Black cisgender women and 80.5 years old for white cisgender women. Sit on that for a moment. 35 years old. Exclusion from historical and current narratives and spaces and opportunities, discrimination, poverty, lack of access to healthcare, and a lack of political power is what is killing trans women of color. People living with intersecting oppressed identities are dealing with compounded struggles. Everyone needs to know Black LGBTQ history because Black, queer, and trans lives depend on it. Back to you, Laurie.
That was amazing, Ann. And I loved how you just shared that piece around enslaved Africans, slavery, is part of white, history. We tend to just place that in, we're going to study Black history, let's talk about slavery. But that's a part of the U.S. story that we need to see as being a central part of who and how we engage in that part of the discussion. And for a lot of folks, again, that would be a challenge to have that conversation. And so, again, it's so important that we establish parameters around how we engage. And as part of that conversation, these principles for participation create that space for us to have an effective dialogue. And while these principles might be looked at as just, meeting norms, while yes, they are, and they're also tools, principles for us to practice. This is how we engage in conversations about race. And there are 5 of them. But I believe that the ones that really shape how we're doing this work today revolve around us telling our truth. How do I tell my truth about my lived experience around race? What it is that I'm recognizing about race in my life and the world around me. And as I share my truth, what's so important is that I recognize that my truth may not be the truth or the only truth. Because again, remember, there are so many multiple perspectives that need to be considered in a conversation about race, but often we only rely on a dominant narrative, meaning that perspective from those who are white. And we continuously dismiss and deny the experiences that people of color are having. And so while it is imperative that we all speak our truth, that we all bring, and speak truth to power, it's also important that we be open to hearing perspectives of people that are different than us. And so we're required to lean in, to listen and learn. What are those perspectives that I haven't had access to? What are those narratives that, are not in my consciousness? And so I have to have a willingness to not only learn from those, but also what are those things that I may need to unlearn? Things that have been constructed for me that just might not be completely true. And for a lot of folks, as they begin to learn and hear from a multitude of perspectives that are different than theirs and begin to realize that everything that they have believed to be true is not true, it often creates some discomfort and people want to shut down. And so what this principle says is that we can't dodge that discomfort. This is how we learn and grow. When it starts to get uncomfortable because it's unfamiliar to us, don't shut down, but ask ourselves, why am I uncomfortable right now? And how do I lean into that discomfort and eventually get to a place of where I am comfortable being uncomfortable? And as I'm able to, lean into all of these principles, what I want to do is commit myself to the cause of anti-racism. And when I talk about anti-racism, I'm talking about consciously, intentionally, and deliberately disrupting racism, whatever that looks like. And so as a part of that, that means now I'm ready to move forward and take action. And not just lean into the work of anti-racism, but what is it that I need to do in order to be an anti-racist? And so again, these parameters are setting the stage, they're framing the foundation for how we're going to engage in this conversation today. And how do you walk away from here continuing to practice these? And as we practice these, again, we want to be conscious about how we step into conversations. Because again, oftentimes we just kind of enter into conversations not really aware of how we're entering, what it is we're going to encounter in that conversation. And oftentimes the conversation doesn't go so well. But if I'm conscious about how I'm processing this information, then I can make choices about how I engage in that conversation. And so what the intersection does is it helps me to pay attention to myself and to the other person, because what we ultimately want to do is get to a place of shared understanding, not necessarily shared agreement, but shared understanding. Again, how do we get to a place where we can lean in to listen and learn? And so what the intersection shows us is that there are 4 ways in which we usually enter into conversations. Some of us might enter through our heart. This is characterized by an emotional response. I'm in my feelings, whatever those feelings look like: sadness, anger, happiness, frustration. And so the first thing I have to do is recognize this is where I'm located, in my heart, and analyze what are those feelings that are surfacing for me. Some of us might enter through our spirit, which is characterized by a moral response. What are my beliefs, my values? What's influencing those? Is this about my religion, my culture? Is it just a moral imperative that I have, a belief in the rightness or wrongness of a situation? What's compelling you then? Some of us might enter through our mind. This is characterized by an intellectual response. I'm in my head, I'm thinking. What is the information that I'm trying to discover? I'm trying to understand the truth or falsity of whatever it is that's going on. And then some of us might enter through our body. This is characterized by a relational response. I need to move to action, do something about it, get my hands and feet involved. And so again, the first thing I want to do is recognize, where am I located? How am I stepping in here? Am I prepared to engage in this conversation, or do I need to press the pause button and get myself equalized? And when I talk about being equalized, basically what this is how do I get balanced? How do I get more centered? And when I name being centered, I'm just saying, in this place, I'm conscious about what I'm feeling in my heart, what I'm believing in my spirit, what I'm thinking in my mind, and the actions that I want to take with my body. Now, regardless of where somebody else steps into the conversation from, because I'm in this place of knowing and being in balance, I can meet that person where they are. And hopefully, we can get to a place of shared understanding. Again, not necessarily shared agreement, which is the way people have conversations now. You got to believe what I believe. You have to think what I think. And now if we can't get there, we're clashing. But what if I'm in a place where I recognize how I'm entering, how you're entering? I can meet you where you are, and we can get to some shared understanding. And so what I just want you to do for this afternoon as we continue to engage is just be conscious of which location you're in as we go through the rest of the seminar. Am I feeling, believing, thinking, or wanting to act? And I might be in a number of them at the same time. Hopefully that helps folks process some stuff. Because again, we're just gonna dig into some narratives around some people that we should know. I once heard someone refer to the Black History 7, which is a phrase that I believe was created to reference, the same people that we talk about and read about and focus on every year during Black History Month. It doesn't matter where I go, I'm always gonna hear Dr. King, Rosa Parks, maybe Harriet Tubman, I'm going to hear probably Nelson Mandela, folks like this. This is the safe list, approved by many in power, and I'm also going to hear some facts about slavery and the civil rights movement and the Underground Railroad. This is where we go over and over and over again. But there are some folks that, we need to begin to learn about, because while these folks have made immeasurable contributions to our history and our struggle, there are many unknown and unsung heroes that sacrificed, suffered, and rewarded this country too. And so I want to take a little time to just highlight some little known historical Black people. And some of these might be familiar to you. Hopefully some of them you do know. And there are probably some that you haven't heard about. And so I'm just going to start with some folks that I looked up. And this is the thing. This isn't a hit on people who are not Black, because Black people don't know these folks either. I sat in, and as I was looking up some of these folks, you know, it's just new information, because again, this isn't what we're taught in school. And if we don't seek it out ourselves, we'll never know. And so just the ones that I selected today, and believe me, there are so many more, I just dig into these folks right here. And the first woman that I want to introduce you to, if you've never heard of her, is Dr. Rebecca Lee Crumpler. And Dr. Crumpler was the first Black woman to earn a medical degree in the United States. You know, it described her as a true pioneer who battled deep-seated prejudice against women and African Americans in medicine. Said at the time, many men argued that women were too delicate or not intelligent enough to be doctors. And in fact, most medical schools barred Black students regardless of gender. But in 1864, she became the first African-American doctor, and her official degree was entitled Doctress of Medicine. And it said many of her patients were very poor people who would otherwise have had no access to medical care, of course, due to the discrimination they faced from many white doctors. So again, Dr. Rebecca Lee Crumpler, she looks so young. I'm like, how old was she when she finished medical school? Wow, she looks like a teenager on that picture. I'm sure some of you have heard of Shirley Chisholm. And, you know, I thought about Shirley because of the history making of Kamala Harris being the first Black female vice president. And of course, Shirley Chisholm was the first African-American woman in Congress. This happened in 1968. And she was the first woman and African-American to seek the nomination for the president of the United States from one of the two major political parties. That was in 1972. It said discrimination followed her quest for the 1972 Democratic Party presidential nomination. She was actually blocked from participating in televised primary debates. And after taking legal action, she was finally permitted to make just one speech. And of her legacy, what she said was, "I want to be remembered as a woman who dared to be a catalyst for change." Shirley Chisholm. The next person I want to mention is Lewis Howard Latimer. It said, with no access to formal education, Latimer taught himself mechanical drawing while in the Union Navy, and eventually became a chief draftsman, patent expert, and inventor. Latimer worked with three of the greatest scientific inventors in American history: Alexander Graham Bell, Hiram Maxim, and Thomas Alva Edison. He played a critical role in the development of the telephone and invented the carbon filament, a significant improvement in the production of the incandescent light bulb. And so again, we always hear Edison and Bell, but we never hear the name Latimer. The guy on the right is another one whose name we don't often hear, Garrett Morgan. It said in 1914, Garrett Morgan patented a breathing device in the form of a canvas hood that would later provide the blueprint for World War I mask, a precursor to the modern gas mask. In 1923, he created a new kind of traffic signal, one with a warning light to alert drivers that they would need to stop. After witnessing a carriage accident at a particular problematic intersection in the city, this was the idea that came to him. He quickly acquired patents for his traffic signal, a rudimentary version of the modern three-way traffic light in the United States, Britain, and Canada. And so again, the traffic light that we deal with every day, this is the guy responsible for it. Bessie Coleman. I see her name every time I go to the Oakland airport. There's the Bessie Coleman Field or something that's on the sign to the right. But it said Bessie Coleman soared across the sky as the first African American and the first Native American woman pilot. Coleman's dream was to own a plane and to open her own flight school. She gave speeches and showed films of her air tricks in churches, theater, and schools to earn money. She refused to speak, though, anywhere that was segregated or discriminated against African Americans. In 1922, she performed the first public flight by an African American woman. And she was famous for doing her loop-de-loops and making the shape of an 8 in an airplane. Wow. Marie Van Brittan Brown was the inventor of the first home security system. So ADT, Safe Light, whatever it is that you got, thank Marie Van Brittan Brown for it. Says she is also credited with the invention of the first closed circuit television. Her invention laid the foundation for later security systems that make use of its features such as video monitoring, remote control door locks, push button alarm triggers, instant messaging to security providers and police, as well as two-way voice communication. Again, these gadgets that we use on a daily basis, no one would ever know. Alexander Miles was awarded a patent in 1887 because he designed an elevator that was able to open and close its own doors and the elevator shaft doors. What used to be was when the elevator would arrive or depart from a given floor, the doors would move by someone opening and closing them manually. But he created this automatic way in which to open the elevator. And it said he contributed greatly to the hazards of operating an elevator. So there we go, man. Charles Richard Drew was an American surgeon and medical researcher. He developed a method for processing and preserving blood plasma or blood without cells, so the blood bank. Plasma lasts much longer than whole blood, making it possible to be stored or banked for longer periods of time. He discovered that the plasma could be dried and then reconstituted when needed. Drew's research into the storage, processing, and shipment of blood plasma saved the lives of hundreds, particularly when he started this during World War II and continues to save lives today. Ida B. Wells was a prominent journalist, activist, and researcher in the late 19th and early 20th century. In her lifetime, she battled sexism, racism, and violence. As a skilled writer, Wells Barnett also used her skills as a journalist to shed light on the conditions of African Americans throughout the South. She traveled internationally, shedding light on lynching to foreign audiences. Abroad, she also openly confronted white women in the suffrage movement who ignored lynching. Because of her stance, she was often ridiculed and ostracized by women's suffrage organizations in the United States. Nevertheless, Wells Barnett remained active during the women's rights movement. And then Booker T. Washington, who was born into slavery and rose to become a leading African-American intellectual of the 19th century, founded Tuskegee Institute, or now Tuskegee University, in 1881. He advised Presidents Roosevelt and Taft and is remembered as the most influential African-American speaker of the time. And so again, those are just, 10 people that I wanted to introduce you to, and there are so many more that we just don't know that are below the line information, or folks that we just haven't had access to, or we haven't sought out an understanding. And so just to kind of open the discussion a little bit, I just ask you, which of these folks are you familiar with, and what was new learning today? And again, I'm just scratching the surface, but I'm just going to come out of this for a minute. What's new for you? What's something that you already knew, or maybe knew a portion of it? Because again, for myself, I definitely knew some of these names, but there were some that was brand new for me, or I didn't know the whole story around it. So I want to just create that space for people. New learning, old learning, new Shirley Chisholm, yeah. But not that she was blocked from running. She wasn't blocked. They wouldn't let her participate in the televised aspect of it when people were giving speeches. So she still ran. It just didn't want to bring too much attention to what was going on. And so again, that kind of gets to what we were talking about and where we're going. This when you're navigating at this intersection of race and gender, and then eventually we'll get to, sexuality, or you don't know what you're being discriminated against for. Is it one? Is it the other? Is it all of it combined? And it becomes this really trying to figure out. Ida B. Wells, yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's just so much good information to learn, and there were so many great resources, and I can share those with you all at some point. But anywhere you Google historical figures in Black history, and you're gonna just see a plethora of names that we can dig into. Let me read some more of this. Everyone is new to me except for Wells and Washington, mostly new. Shirley. It would be cool. Right.
Get closer. Oh, I do.
Gianna, your mute is off. Did you mean to? Everyone at Crosswalk. There you go. Good. We're all participating, right? We can talk too, not just on chat. My kiddo is 5 and came home from kindergarten yesterday talking about Garrett Morgan. And so I had seen his picture on your slides, but I didn't know anything about him. So she educated me yesterday in great detail about Garrett Morgan. But it gave me hope that maybe our kiddos are learning a different history. And I'm in the South, so I think that's especially promising.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, they're creating so many more books now that tell these stories too that are available. And so that's the great thing about little kids. We'll get an opportunity to grow up reading these storybooks because so many more people are creating them and recognizing that kids need to learn this history. And again, this intersection of recognizing that Black history is American history and not just Black history over here during the month of February. But how does this become normalized that this is just a part of the conversation, the same way we learn about George Washington and Thomas Jefferson and all these other folks?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I would like to ask you a question. I was trying to remember the gentleman, the brother that invented the heart surgery, and what year that was.
Are you talking about, don't tell me, please, Louise, and I'm looking at him. I know you're talking about the first open heart surgery.
Yes. And I have a book on majority of the brothers and sisters that invented things. And when I was at Sacramento City College, taking an African class, and 15 of us was able to go to Africa, which I declined when I found out how long it was going to take to get there. The way we were going was cheap. Okay, but we learned a lot about the gentleman invented the peanut butter.
Yep.
And everything. So the book that I got was
Washington
only
Carver.
yes, and we only had two, and I have one. I don't know who had the other one. And
Daniel Hale Williams is the first open heart
surgery. Yeah, you got him. Okay, then. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, but you're right. If we don't seek it out, and that's when we talk about, as we lean into this work of anti-racism and having these conversations, it has to be consciously, intentionally, and deliberately. Because it's not going to be there. It's not in the history books that are taught in school. It's not in the usual curriculum. You know, and the good thing is that, you know, here in California, at least, they're about to start teaching ethnic studies as a required class that high school kids have to, you know, have before graduation. But other than that, it's just mainstream U.S. history, which will be the same stories that we learned 20, 30 years ago. Lilia, I know you're not that old, but you know, I go back. I see you on my screen, so that's why I said that. But you know, and the cycle just continues to be perpetuated. And so if kids who are white only learn about Blackness through the lens of slavery, then that's what folks know. When we're talking about Blackness, the only thing that, you know, they participated in was slavery, and not how people worked against the odds. How we talk about someone like Booker T. Washington, who was actually born into slavery and still rose to such prominence in this country. And so just getting at this, the ways in which they endured the adversity and the challenges and the trauma. When I first got on, I heard people talking about trauma, when they just, to be able to navigate through all of that and still make such an enormous contribution to this country is just, I don't know if we're built like that now. I think these people were like superhuman. But again, you know, and I'm being facetious, because what I try to get students to recognize as I work with them is that these were, when I talk about the usual, these were just everyday people who just decided that things need to change. And I need to do something about it, and I can do something about it. And that's all it takes. That's all it takes. Wow. So as we, you know, look at those folks, and thanks for sharing those. And as we look at those, you know, we also talked about how do we begin to look at this again through this intersectional lens, and how did it show up when race and sexual orientation or identity or any of these aspects played into it? How did that impact folks, you know? And so we started talking about intersectionality, and Audre Lorde said, you know, there's no such thing as a single issue struggle, because we do not live single issue lives, and that's for everyone. But what she was naming at the time was this concept of intersectionality before there was even a name for it, because the term wasn't actually coined until 1989 by Dr. Kimberly Crenshaw. And again, when we're talking about intersectionality, we're talking about how these classical conceptualizations of oppression within society, you know, such as racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, classism, whatever it is, how they do not act independently of one another, but basically how they begin to interrelate, creating a whole different form of oppression. And so when that happens, we can't look at them separately anymore. And so where I want to go with this is just, again, the strength and courage, the audacity, I'll say, of these folks who were navigating not just being Black in a racist society, or being queer in a homo or transphobic society, you know, or being a woman in a sexist society, but to navigate all of that, just how badass were these folks that we're getting ready to talk about. And so again, some of these names you may be familiar with, and perhaps you didn't know that they were a part of the family or whatever it is, but we're gonna highlight some of these folks too. And so we're gonna start with Langston Hughes. You know, and there'll be many who are like, Langston Hughes, you know, he was this huge figure in the Harlem Renaissance. You know, when we're talking about the Harlem Renaissance, when Harlem was this cultural mecca for Black folks, where they had so many different things going on: gender bending, partying, excitement. I wish I could have been a part of the Harlem Renaissance. I would gladly go back and be around that. But this was during a time, you know, he was hobnobbing with Zora Neale Hurston, James Weldon Johnson, who actually wrote Lift Every Voice and Sing, just to name a very few of the influentials. And when I say Zora Neale Hurston, she was a lesbian. You know, many folks didn't know that. But Hughes deeply believed that art, you know, inclusive of writing and theater and all of these ways in which it could be expressed, should represent the experiences and culture of the Black folk. Images of rural and urban working class African Americans filled his poetry and prose. Excuse me. And his writing celebrated blues and jazz culture. But here's the thing: Langston never was really out as a gay man. It was just widely believed that he was. And there are many that said he wrote in homosexual codes, which was how it was described in a lot of his prose. And they said his biggest fear for not being open about who he was the loss of the respect of the Black church-going community. And so he remained pretty closeted throughout his life. The next guy I want to talk about is Bayard Rustin, who was a huge influence in the civil rights movement, who worked tirelessly for not just civil rights, but socialism, nonviolence, and gay rights. And what a lot of people don't know is that he was one of Dr. Martin Luther King's right-hand men in the civil rights movement. However, because he was gay, his legacy was pushed to the margins. In fact, Dr. King was threatened with the fact that because he was gay and was a part of his camp, that Adam Clayton Powell was going to leak to people that there was some kind of relationship going on between Bayard and Dr. King if he didn't remove Bayard from his camp. And at first, King pushed back because he knew how important Bayard was to the work that he was doing. But when he continued to threaten him, King finally broke under the pressure and did so. But ultimately, he realized that he needed him back. And it was actually Bayard who was the architect and the brains behind the March on Washington. And it said initially, Bayard did keep his personal life private before, you know, people found out. But after being arrested one time while he was working against desegregation of a bus line, he said he realized that it was an absolute necessity for me to declare, his words, homosexuality, because if I didn't, I was a part of the prejudice. I was aiding and abetting the prejudice that was a part of the effort to destroy me. And so again, that navigation at the intersection. Gladys Bentley who was a blues singer, pianist, entertainer during the Harlem Renaissance. Again, she was a singer and what was described as a cross-dresser then. She was one of the most well-known and financially successful Black women in the United States because of her entertainment. She was a pioneer in pushing the envelope of gender, sexuality, class, and race with parody and exaggeration. She headlined in nightclubs such as the Cotton Club and the Apollo, and it was said that she was so bold that she flaunted who she was and openly flirted with women in the audience. And in fact, it said in 1923, she married her lover in a well-publicized civil union. But because of her openness, she was also targeted. And it said in the 1950s, she actually recanted her lesbianism. And her report, this was an Ebony magazine article that they did on her. She reported that she sought treatment. And in her words, a miracle happened and she became a woman again. But again, this was a sign of the times. This was McCarthyism and all these things that kicked in that suppressed her just being her authentic self. I love Gladys Bentley. I've seen some footage of her. She was amazing. Lorraine Hansberry, was a playwright and a writer. She was a groundbreaking artist, recognized for her strong, passionate voice on gender, class, and racial issues. She was the first Black playwright and youngest American to win a New York Critics Circle Award. She was the first African-American female author to have a play performed on Broadway. Her best-known work, we all know, A Raisin in the Sun. And although she was married to a man, she published a lot of lesbian-themed stories. In fact, she fell in love with one of her writing partners and engaged in a long-term relationship. She didn't, however, come out until nearly a half century after her death, when the man in which she was married to revealed some of her unsealed diaries that described or revealed that she was a lesbian. And she, in her words, were the inspiration for Nina Simone's song To Be Young, Gifted and Black. Audre Lorde, writer, feminist, womanist, librarian, civil rights activist, was a self-described Black lesbian mother, warrior, poet who dedicated her life and creative talent to confronting and addressing injustices of racism, sexism, classism, and homophobia. Concerned with modern society's tendency to categorize groups of people, she fought the marginalization of such categories as lesbian and Black woman. She was central to many liberation movements and activist circles, including second wave feminism, civil rights, and Black cultural movements and struggles for LGBTQ equality. James Baldwin, who we started with, described as author, radical, activist, public intellectual, unapologetically Black, a prophet. Someone said he was intersectional before there was a classification of intersectional. As a writer, he garnered acclaim across various mediums. And at one point, disillusioned by American prejudice, he left and moved to Paris. One of the things was he said he didn't want to be classified as merely a Negro or merely a Negro writer. He also hoped to come to terms with his sexual ambivalence and escape the ways in which many Black men, many Black gay men during that time were being treated. And one of the things that he named, because he was very good at talking about sexuality and race. And this was a quote that he said when competing victimization comes up. He said, "I think white gay people feel cheated because they were born in principle in a society in which they were supposed to be safe. The anomaly of their sexuality puts them in danger unexpectedly. Their reaction seems to me in direct proportion to their sense of feeling cheated of the advantages which accrue to white people in a white society. There's an element, it has always seemed to me, of bewilderment and complaint. Now, that may sound very harsh, but the gay world as such is no more prepared to accept Black people than anywhere else in society. It's a very hermetically sealed world with very unattractive features, including racism. And so again, when that notion comes up of, I can't be racist, I'm gay, he just really had a strong perspective around that. And then the last two I just want to name are Barbara Jordan and Marsha P. Johnson. Barbara Jordan, American lawyer, educator, and politician, leader in the civil rights movement, first Black woman elected to the Texas Senate after Reconstruction, and the first Southern Black woman elected to the United States House of Representatives. She was an incredibly gifted orator and had the honor of becoming the first Black female keynote speaker at the 76th Democratic National Convention. And, again, here's someone who remained publicly closeted throughout most of her life. Although in private, she identified as a lesbian and had a partner for nearly 30 years. And then Marsha P. Johnson, an activist, self-identified drag queen, performer, and survivor, a prominent figure in the Stonewall Uprising of 1969. She quickly became a prominent fixture in the LGBTQ community, and it was her who was a prominent, what it says, her forthright nature and enduring strength led her to speak out against injustices. And on June 28, 1969, at the Stonewall Inn on Christopher Street, things turned violent after members of the community were harassed by the NYPD. Many eyewitnesses have identified Marsha as one of the main instigators of the uprising, and thus she's recognized as a vanguard of the gay liberation movement in the United States. And so again, just thinking about these intersections that these folks are navigating and still rise into prominence. And it just made me reflect on this poem by Pat Parker. And what she said in this poem was, if I could take all my parts with me when I go somewhere and not have to say to one of them, no, you stay home tonight. You won't be welcome because I'm going to an all-white party where I can be gay, but not Black. Or I'm going to a Black poetry reading and half the poets are anti-gay, or thousands of situations where something of what I am cannot come with me. The day all the different parts of me can come along, we would have what I would call a revolution. And so just thinking about that, having to hide your parts depending on where you are navigating or where you are in the moment. And so I guess the question I'll just put out there, have you ever felt like you had to hide any of your parts? Thinking about that, have you ever had to hide your parts? And Ann and Lilia know that, I grew up in the South. I'm from Mississippi and lived in Georgia for a long time. And for a long time, yes, I was hiding parts left and right. And it's almost this consciousness, as Du Bois talks about it in Race, this double consciousness of recognizing who I can be in one place and who I have to be in another place, and having to navigate that, and just the fatigue of it all, where you can't just be your authentic self, which is a privilege of when we are, of what is considered the norm in this society, which is white, male, cisgender, heterosexual. And anytime you differ from any of that, then you're marginalized. And so sometimes we think about having to hide those parts. And so I'll open that up. When have you ever had to hide your parts in your intersectional identity? That's real. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's come up. I'm doing some work with a couple of temples here in the Bay Area, and that has surfaced a number of times where it may not be race, but I haven't felt safe because of my religion. Yep, I'm right there with you, Juan. That's why I came to California. Yeah. And so we're all navigating these intersectional identities. And if we haven't been able to just show up authentically, the fatigue of it all that we all bear. Wow. Wow. Thank you all. Thanks for yeah. We all have our journey, and we're all just trying to make it. I understand completely. So thanks for being vulnerable enough, for speaking your truth in the chat, and just allowing us to, be a part of this with you. Thank you so much. I'm gonna pass it on to my teammates.
Laurie, can I interject something before you can pass it on? But I want to speak to one of the comments that came up, just because this is what we do in RFL. So I just want to, the comment about hiding your religion, I have a overlap, a way that we kind of intersect, and this is called the intersection. But so I live in North Carolina now and have a lot of support with the neighbors that we live close to, as a queer couple, as a same-sex couple with kids. And our neighbors across the street are really, really kind and super, come over and tell us what great parents we are. And they're very affirming. And then they told us that they had been coming from church, and they got really weird about it. And then the next day, the woman came over and she said, I feel like I need to talk with you and tell you that my church is an affirming one. And I was feeling weird. I didn't want you to feel like we would go to a church that doesn't affirm same-sex marriage or your sexual orientation. And it mattered to me a lot that I came and told you that. And it was just really interesting, because I do think we have, in all ways, we kind of make assumptions about people. And I appreciated that she came and talked to us about that, because that's how we bridge the differences and join together, is like being open and talking about it. And it lent to a very sweet discussion. So yeah.
No, that's important. And that's how we build the bridges. We don't do enough of that, talking to each other. We lean into assumptions and about who people are and how they might react or respond to us based on, identities or faith or whatever it is. So I love that you all got to have that conversation. That's awesome. Now I'm passing off the baton to you two.
Got it. Can you put the slides back up?
Yes.
Please? Okay. Go ahead, Lilia.
All righty. Thank you for that great discussion, everybody. So when we're thinking about this concept of coming to a place with all of our parts, I just want to recognize that when we think about Black history, when we're celebrating Black History Month, the totality of Black individuals isn't something that's always discussed. And so we're going to get into the contemporary LGBTQ and Black, change makers that we have to look up to today. But I want to recognize, who is our LGBTQ Black community today in America. And so I'll share some statistics with you. There's 1.2 million Black LGBTQ adults living in the United States. 40% of LGBTQ people, that's all LGBTQ people, are people of color, and 12% of them are Black. So when we're thinking through this intersectional lens, you know, I think it's really important that we recognize there's significant diversity within the identities of Black LGBTQ youth. And I'm going to share some statistics from the Trevor Project. They did a report titled All Black Lives Matter, speaking about mental health of the Black LGBTQ youth community. So they shared that 31% of Black LGBTQ youth identified as gay or lesbian, 35% as bisexual, 20% as pansexual, and 9% as queer. 1 in 3 Black LGBTQ youth identified as transgender or non-binary. And more than 1 in 4 Black LGBTQ youth use pronouns or pronoun combinations that fall outside of our binary construction of gender. So Black LGBTQ youth, keeping all that in mind, often report mental health challenges, including suicidal ideation. So thinking back to the presentation that JT shared and the importance of bringing health and wellness into our celebrations of Black History Month, the Trevor Project also shared some statistics that I think are just so important to bring to your attention. 44% of Black LGBTQ youth seriously considered suicide in the past 12 months. And this is from a report that was published in 2020. So I want you to kind of sit with, we're still continuing to live in a pandemic. We're still in many communities having surges and having to isolate. And these statistics could be even more severe today. 63% of Black LGBTQ youth report symptoms of major depressive disorder, including 71% of our Black, transgender, and non-binary youth. So I'll pass it off to Anne.
That same report from the Trevor Project also identified high impact protective factors. So looking at some of the positive things that we can do for our Black LGBTQ youth. Those protective factors include having one supportive person in their life. And that goes across the board for all LGBTQ people. It's really like having one supportive adult. So whether that's a parent or that's a grandparent or a teacher, that could be a huge protective factor from the suicidal ideation, the substance use, and the depression that Lilia was talking about. Also having access to in-person LGBTQ affirming spaces. So Black youth who had access to at least one LGBTQ affirming space attempted suicide at 50% lower rates compared to those without access to those spaces. Also, before we dive into the contemporary LGBTQ and Black leaders that some of us know and some are going to learn about today, an increase in overall queer representation in Hollywood, the media, and in leadership roles ensures that the more impressionable members of the queer community can see themselves in their representation, and they can relate to these people in a positive light, and that can play an important role in the health and well-being of Black LGBTQ youth.
All right, so our bottom line is representation matters. So Laurie, if you want to go to the next slide, we'll share with you some of the amazing leaders we have today that are bringing that representation to light. So our first selection here is Alicia Garza, who uses she, her series pronouns and describes herself as an organizer, a writer, and a freedom dreamer. I love that. I'm going to add that to my own resume. Alicia has held various social justice positions throughout her life, but you might recognize her as one of the co-founders of the Black Lives Matter movement. And Alicia has shared in many interviews that intersectionality has been a key focus of the Black Lives Matter movement. She is open about her own queerness and included on the Black Lives Matter website this call out speaking to intersectionality that I want to share with you. So she says that the Black Lives Matter movement outlines that it seeks to dismantle cisgender privilege and uplift Black trans folks, as well as fostering a queer affirming network and to build a space that is free from sexism, misogyny, and environments in which men are centered. And speaking of the three co-founders of Black Lives Matter, she said, it was important for us as Black women, two of which are queer, to actually talk about the totality of Black life.
Great. And then the other person here on this slide is Billy Porter, who uses he, him pronouns. Billy Porter is a gay award-winning actor, singer, and author. Billy Porter won the 2013 Tony Award for Best Actor in a Musical for his role as Lola in Kinky Boots. He credits that part for cracking open his feminine side to confront toxic masculinity. So Billy Porter uses the red carpet to really push gender norms. He makes fashion choices that are an intersection of art and activism. In 2021, so last year, Billy Porter shared living HIV positive for 14 years. And that is another one, speaking of identities or parts that we don't always bring forward because of stigma or shame. Billy Porter as a leader and as someone who is a public figure came out as HIV positive to reduce that shame and stigma still associated with the diagnosis.
Next slide, Laurie. So here we have Laverne Cox, who uses she, her series pronouns. We know her as a transgender activist, transgender actress and LGBTQ activist. You might recognize her from the 2012 breakthrough she had for her role in Orange is the New Black. But she's also a trailblazer in so many other ways. She is an executive producer. She's created documentaries called The T Word in 2014 and Free CC in 2016. For her work on The T Word, she won an Emmy, and she was the first transgender woman to win for an executive producer role.
And next to Laverne Cox is Jason Collins, uses he, him pronouns. And he is a former basketball player. So he was the first active player in one of the 4 major American professional team sports to announce that he is gay. And I'm just going to read a quick quote from Jason Collins. So he said, "I didn't set out to be the first openly gay athlete playing in a major American team sport, but since I am, I'm happy to start the conversation. I wish I wasn't the kid in the classroom raising his hand saying, I'm different. If I had my way, someone else would have already done this. Nobody has, which is why I'm raising my hand."
Next slide, please.
All right, and on the your left is Lena Waithe, who uses she, her pronouns. Lena is a lesbian American actress, producer, and screenwriter. She's known for co-writing and acting in the Netflix series Master of None. In 2017, she was the first Black woman to receive an award for outstanding writing in a comedy series for her work on Master of None. She, in 2018, received the Trevor Project Hero Award for her work advancing LGBTQ representation on screens and behind the scenes. I'm going to share a quote from Lena now too. "In these trying times, images are very important, particularly for our impressionable youth. They're looking to the big and small screen to see glimpses of themselves. Too often, gay stories are steeped in tragedy. Too often, queer stories are told by people that aren't even in the queer community. Our trials and tribulations are often exploited by Hollywood just to make a buck. Many queer kids, they don't feel love. They don't feel seen and they don't feel heard. I don't want these kids to live, but I want them to live their best lives because we as a society will benefit from all the many gifts they have to share.
So true. Next to Lena, we have Melanie Willingham, who uses she, they series pronouns. And Melanie is the first Black non-binary executive director for our Gay, Lesbian, and Straight Education Network that you might know as GLSEN. They became ED in 2019. So GLSEN was founded by a group of teachers in 1990 with the goal of making schools safer for lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, and queer K through 12 students. In her new role, Melanie is excited about supporting young people in schools across the country so they have the power to make their schools safer. And they said, LGBTQ young people in schools and their student groups like GSAs have always been the hub, kind of the breeding ground, the soil from which these sparks of activism come up. They said, what we understand is that young people, period, are going to help us understand the vision forward and the way forward to the future. Next slide, please. And here we have Dr. Angela Davis, who uses she, her series pronouns. Before the world really had a word for it, intersectionality was something that Dr. Davis was practicing. She's a scholar, writer, and activist, and was living intersectionality. She argued not just for Black liberation, but for the rights of women and queer and transgender people as well. You might be familiar with a famous quote from Angela Davis that we often see come up in the Black Lives Matter movement through protest signs, and certainly at Rainbow Action Network's Chalk for Justice events, which says, I am no longer accepting the things I cannot change. I am changing the things I cannot accept. Next slide, please.
Lily, I just want to throw in me trying to take over Angela Davis's page because I was proud that I got to meet her and take a picture with her.
I would have done the same thing, Laurie.
I love that picture. All right, so we are running close on time here, but we had some questions we just wanted to throw out there is, why is it important to acknowledge the intersections of our identities? And why is it important to see representation of Black LGBTQ people in media? Maybe just pop your answers into the chat. Were these new faces for people? Faces and stories?
Thank you for your comments, everyone. It was really interesting, similarly to what Dr. Laurie shared. You know, some of these individuals, I've been kind of familiar with their names, maybe part of their story, but really getting to research these individuals and the totality of who they are really helped me, you know, appreciate their story and how they're shaping the world that we live in today. Do we want to check out the next question?
Yeah, Laurie, will you go to it? Yeah. So you can't get through a Rainbow Action Network collaborative effort without learning a little bit about what children's books can help you have conversations with your kiddos. And like Laurie said earlier, there are so many books coming out now that make it easier to have a conversation with kids about not only Black history, but also having the representation of seeing Black queer children in stories and Black authors of stories. So this is a selection. It is in no way all of the books that are available, but this is what we kind of wanted to highlight as it's a mix of those stories. So there's some books here that have LGBTQ Black people's historical stories shared. There are Black queer characters in several of the books, and many of them are authored by Black folks and Black LGBTQ folks. They are celebratory of the Black experience. They aren't just simply about the bad stuff. There is some of that here, and it's important that we can talk about all of that as a whole. And many of them are available in the Rainbow Little Libraries throughout Napa County. So you can find a list of those books and those locations at the First 5 Napa website.
Next slide, please.
So, again, as we think about these principles and engaging in the conversation and the learning through what we've shared today, through with your children as they begin to engage and interact with, these diverse materials and just learning things in a different way than, as I mentioned before, that many of us on this call have, how do we continue to practice these principles? Again, leaning into listen and learn in particular, seeking out these multiple perspectives, multiple narratives, learning these stories that just haven't been normalized in how we talk about history or how we talk about the experiences that people are having in our society. And if discomfort starts to surface, don't run away from it. But how do we sit in it? How do we ask ourselves, why am I uncomfortable right now? And what do I need to do to continue to develop the muscle to lean into this conversation, to lean into this place of learning? And so one of the questions that, we just kind of laid out there is around how do we, white people as well as other people of color, show solidarity by practicing these principles. And again, when we look at this, we're talking about people who might have, because if we talk about racism, remember, we're talking about a system of power based on beliefs about who people are, simply based on what they look like. There's a value placed on what it means to be white versus what it means to be Black versus what it means to be Latine versus what it means to be Asian, whatever. There's a value placed on that. And so how do those who are in power, show solidarity by practicing these principles? And so I know I just kind of answered the question, but that's because we are running out of time. And so I just want you to really think about, what is it like when you are in a place of learning something new? And so again, what these principles do is they give you a framework to reference as you do that. And so just thinking about, as I exist in my dominant experience, what is it that I can do to be in solidarity with those who are not, whether that be around race, whether that be around sexual orientation, whatever it is, identity. How do I think about the privilege that I have from that positionality, and how do I support or leverage that power and privilege that I have in order to make sure that other folks are having a similar experience as I am? And then, not only practicing those for, thinking about it in that way, but what do I do as I leave here? How do I really commit to the cause and take action? And so, yes, making sure that I stand in my truth, I stand in my power for the ultimate benefit of others, and also just really thinking about justice. I mean, what is it that I can do to ensure that justice takes place? And how do I think about it as a person who is Black? What does it look like for me? And then what does it look like for people who are not Black? And so just really, these are things for you to take home with you, walk away with this, and just really marinate in them about how you move from knowledge to know-how, from theory to action, in order to, again, you know, create this place of justice that we all want to see. Any following, anything else? And Lilia, my partners, JT.
I mostly just want to say thank you to Dr. Laurie Watson for being here today, for putting all the work into the slides with us, and for just being our co-conspirator in the Rainbow Family League work. I never want it to end. I just think it's awesome to work with you, and think you're awesome, so thank you.
It is awesome to work with y'all. We're going to keep this going. We're taking it on the road.
I love it.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much for being here.
I wish Dr. Laurie, I didn't even like the soul food. You're not coming up to Napa for a meal, are you?
I'm missing out on some soul food. I didn't even know they had soul food in Napa. Where did that soul food come from?
JT is making sure that it is there tonight.
I'm making sure it's legit.
Oh my goodness.
Making sure it's legit. It's legit.
It's legit. All right, I'm gonna take your word for it, JT.
Well, it's not home. Yeah, we had to go outside the county to get it in. So that's
Okay. Now I get it. Well, you all enjoy it for me. Man, I wish I was there.
Thanks,
well, thank you, Dr. Laurie. Really appreciate it. And Ann and Lilia, the great presentation and very important message. So thank you. And yeah, but before we go, we just kind of want to do some announcement, do some thank yous as well, because there's a lot of people that were involved in this that are actually behind the scene. And so it did take a collective effort to pull this off in such little time. And so these are all the folks right here that were involved in this program and this project. And there's so many people. And so I know a lot of you all probably won't make it out here to the for the 4:30 to 6 o'clock. But there are folks in youth who did who did live art. They made art here all day today, and they're gonna showcase that art out in front of the church. So as folks are coming in to get their food, they can get out and they can see some of the art. There's also art that's done from a couple of elementary schools that you see posted up. And yeah, so it's kind of like an outside exhibit as folks picking up their stuff. And Lilia, I believe that there are some packages too. You wanna give them a little bit of details about that?
Yes, thank you, JT. So First Five, Napa County collaborated with one of our attendees here, Britannia, who's a local Napa artist, to create some coloring pages for our families. And they feature many of the Black leaders we saw in today's presentation, but they also include a caption on each coloring page. And we're hoping that that will help facilitate conversations about these Black leaders and their totality, all of their identities between children and families. They're totally free. Please go and pick them up. And we'd love to hear your thoughts.
Thank you. Yeah, and then also just wanted to just to talk about, make sure, you go and patronize these Black businesses, and the only three in Napa, but that's very important to go see James Moss, Brown Estates Winery, Buster's, and then Durrell at State Line Barbecue, okay? So, yeah, so that's all we have for today. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. I really appreciate it. It was another great one, and I'm hoping that next year we can all be in person and experience that again. So thank you all for the folks who are coming down to pick up food. It's from 4:30 to 6 o'clock. We do have to get out of here shortly after 6, so try to make it as soon as possible and come get some of this delicious food, okay? Well, thanks to everybody for joining us again, and we will see you all next year. Thank you.
Take care, everybody.
JT, don't say it was delicious anymore. I don't want to hear it one more time.
Oh, and he didn't tell you about the little tiny bottles of wine either that I.
Y'all are not right. Y'all are not right.
Enjoy, everybody. Have some extra for Laurie and I.
Yes, please do. Please do. Y'all take care.
Take care.
Bye.
All right.
I'm going back to the south. I'm going back, where my roots ain't watered down. Growing like a baobab tree of life on fertile ground. My ancestor put me on game, on charm, on gold chains, with my old shoe energy. Drip all on me. Uncle that she keep it. Hold up, don't I smell like such a non-chopper incense.